Okay, so when we talk about rosé, one of the specific, very specific points or parameter to this wine is really that we're talking about three big attributes: the color, the aromas, and the mouthfeel. And one thing that I think really matters a lot and is what really make a rosé more qualitative is the coherence between the color, the aromas, and the mouthfeel. So when you see a color, you're actually already expecting a taste and a mouth. You already know what you are expecting. Customers choose rosé by the color usually, and you see a very light colored rosé, you're expecting maybe a nose with some stone fruit, floral, pear type of aromas, and also a very elegant and refined mouthfeel with roundness and also acidity. If you see a rosé that is way more colored, like let's say in the darker red tones, you are more expecting blackberry, blueberry, strawberry type of aromas. Really, we're talking about berries, red fruit, cherries with a bigger, fuller mouthfeel. It really makes sense, and if you get a very light color with the mouthfeel of a dark color, the consumer gets completely confused and usually unsatisfied because it's not its expectation. And so we're going to talk about this. So really keep in mind that you define your style usually by the color. The color is already defining and guiding which aromas and mouthfeel you are going to get. The main parameters that impact the color are actually the pressing, and these are in order: the pressing, the grape variety, maceration and the use of enzyme, and the harvest date. In terms of aromas, the grape variety, the yeast that you use, the nutrients regime that you use, and the harvest date. And in terms of mouthfeel, we are talking about the pressing, the yeast that you use, the aging that you choose, lees or no lees, oak or no oak, and the harvest date. So these are really the main parameter to control when you make rosé, because they will impact color, aroma, and mouthfeel, and they will help you having this coherence between these three parameters. So today we're going to talk about everything, of course, but all these parameters I just said, we'll make sure to touch base on them. One big thing that is important all across the process and also all across colors, aroma, and mouthfeel is really about oxygen management. Rosé is very sensitive to oxidation, and an oxidized rosé, when you get into this orangey colors, is usually not appealing and sells way less on the shelf. Okay, so before I go into the program of today and really the winemaking process, I just want to actually ask everyone, if I find a way to ask. Yes, just to understand, I want to know if you can answer this little poll here, if you are making rosé more direct press or saignée. So it's two big style of making rosé. When we're talking about saignée, we are really talking about you harvest the grapes for red wine maturity. So it's usually not the optimal maturity. For rosé, we are talking darker color because the grapes are more mature, and as you saw, the harvest date is impacting a lot the aromas, the color, and the mouthfeel. We are usually talking about fruitier aromas, cherry, strawberry, red fruit aromas, less varietal aromas, so less thiolic, actually less polysaccharides because there is no press fraction. This is only a draining juice, so we are having usually a little bit lighter mouthfeel with some phenolic compounds that we need to treat. So making rosé from saignée is possible. We can make a good rosé from saignée. It requires a little bit more work in the juice preparation, and usually the style is getting more orientated towards esters, red fruits, because the color is darker. Okay, Then on the other hand, when we do wine rosé from direct press, we can harvest for rosé. So it changed completely the composition of the grapes. And so the aromas that we can get, the color we can get, and also the mouthfeel we can get. We can get way more varietals aromas, so more terpenes, more noesoprenoids, more thiolic compounds. The color is usually lighter because there is less extractability, less ripeness in the grapes. There is more acidity and lower alcohol. There is more complexity, more balance, and more finesse when we talk about a direct press. Either way, we can do good rosé, and I will talk about both, but I'm glad to see that there is more, we have way more people, we have 77% of the participants that make rosé from direct press, which means that I will focus on direct pressing today. Thank you for the poll. So the program, we're going to talk about harvest, because it is important. It is really the first parameter that will define your style. Then we're going to talk about how we control the extraction of phenolic compounds, color, but also aromatic precursors and polysaccharides for the mouthfeel. Next step is the juice preparation. This is an essential step really to not miss. It is very important and done all the time in at least, in Provence area, juice preparation. You can't ferment your juice without preparing it. That's where you can really adjust the color, achieve oxidative stability, help to fine-tune the mouthfeel before you actually can strip the wine. So we will talk about it at juice stage. It's very, very important when you do rosé from Saignée, even more important. Fermentation management, that's where you're going to create your aromas and work on your mouthfeel. So we'll talk about yeast and nutrition here. There is another step that we can do during aging. Of course, we can work on the mouthfeel. Aging on lees is usually very positive to release some manoprotein and get some roundness in the palate. But we can also increase aromatic expression here. So we'll talk about this. And the last point will be how we can preserve aromas and everything we did so far until bottling to make sure we maintain a highly qualitative rosé all the way to the bottom. So pretty long program. So let's start talking about harvest decisions. So the idea is to think rosé from the vineyards. If you go in Provence, you would see that, and you talk to some vineyard manager, they cultivate the vine for rosé. So their vineyard practice are already different. The clone that they plant will be different. The grape variety, well, in Provence, it's a lot of Grenache, Cinsault, Syrah Mourvèdre, but you could make rosé from many other varieties. Usually you want bigger cluster if you can, bigger berries. You can work with irrigation or not. Fertilization is very important. Having a lot of nitrogen in the plant will help you having actually more aromatic and thiolic wines. Okay, so there is a lot of work in the vineyards. Vineyard practices will define really the quality of your grapes. And you want to think rosé from the vineyards, unless you do Saignée from red grapes. So the harvest is the first essential step for quality. What are the indicators? Usually we look at bricks. For rosé, we're looking at lighter alcohol content. So from 21 to 23 bricks, that would be really optimal. But we don't look only at bricks. What we want to is to maintain a high acidity and a lower pH. So we're going to look at the pH evolution, the total acidity, and if you can look at the malic, that's really the best indicator. Until the malic is high, it's great. As soon as the malic start to drop, usually it means that it's time. There is too much sun, too much heat, and it's time to pick because the bricks are going to increase just because they are the berries are drying, but not because they are getting more mature. So malic acid is a very good indicator. Sensory, of course, and extractability. So when you taste, you crush the berry in your finger, you see how much color you can extract there. Once you harvest, it's important to have a fast process from the picking moment to the fermentation to limit oxidation. So you want to control all the maceration because that's what will define your color. So limit transport time, make sure you are at cold temperature from your vineyard to the winery. Make sure you cover from oxygen contact, so you can use dry ice. You can also use some sacrificial tannins that can be very useful to really help scavenge oxygen and limit the actually the oxidases, so the PPO and the lacase, so limit the enzymatic reaction that will oxidize all your wine. And then there is a very interesting study that I wanted to show you where we see that the moment of picking is actually going to define the amount of aromatic precursor. So there is a study that they looked at so a precursor of the 3-MH, the glutathione 3-MH, which is a precursor of thiolic compounds, aromatic thiols. And they basically look at it during the full day with sun exposure and not with temperature change, of course. And basically the conclusion was that there is 40% more precursors if you pick before 11 a.m. or after 5 p.m. So when the temperature is lower, when the sun is lower, the plant is actually processing, having more aromatic precursors in the berries at this time. There is some transfer of precursors, in the flow. And yeah, so good to pick early morning because, of course, depending where you are in the world, this will not always be true, but when you pick early morning or at night, you will always have your grapes in the peak of aromatic precursor. Okay, so that's, if possible, it's always more interesting, and you keep the temperature colder too. So second point that is very important is the extraction. So that's where you will build your wine potential. So we want to extract the grape compounds. What do we want to extract? Phenolic compounds, which are responsible of structure, body, of the wine, weight of the wine, but also color. Aromatic precursors, so all the thiolic compounds, but also some amino acids that will be precursors of esters and ethyl esters, terpenes, noresoprenoids, and then polysaccharides, which are very important for the mouthfeel. It really makes a big difference for the mouthfeel, and that's one of the big difference between making wine from Saignée or making a direct press. It's a polysaccharide content. How can we extract this? We can do skin contact maceration. This will be what Saignée does. That's the skin contact and maceration. Pressing, which is usually the most commonly used tool that we have to control, though. We are going to talk about this. Using a maceration and extraction enzyme, that's essential. So the nosin crush will be the enzyme we recommend. You just add it on the grapes, usually when you fill your press or when you pick, if you want some more maceration. Just a little study here that has been done at the Center of Rosé, where enzyme, to show you the enzyme are very commonly used in the rosé winemaking, mostly to get, so there is two reasons, but the big one is to just get more qualitative juice. But when you use enzymes or the enzyme crush at pressing, when you fill the press, you basically have two things. Or you can increase you keep your standard press program, and you will increase the full yield of juice by about 10% just by using an enzyme. So you get more juice overall. Or you can decide that you want to keep the same juice content that you would do with your normal pressing cycle, but you go with a short pressing cycle. So you do enzyme and then you do a short press cycle. So you save time in terms of pressing, but you save also quality because you will go way lighter in pressure and so better quality juice. So to approach here, it really depends what you want to do, or you increase the volume of your pressing, by using enzyme, and then you can treat the press fraction in a different way, or you just decide to press very light and maintain a lower volume, but still having a good volume for a press that will not go about 1 bar. So using enzyme can really increase your free roll yield of juice and wine. So this is actually working also if you use an enzyme crush in red wine and you do Saignée, so you will increase your free run yield easily 3 to 9%. Actually, we see way more 9% than 3. You increase aromatic compounds release because enzyme is going to help you release everything that is in the cells of the skin. You increase the polysaccharide content 50 to 60%. That's huge. And that's really going to change the mouthfeel you get. You're going to increase the phenolic compound and the color. So you're going to make sure you can macerate less time or press less strong. And of course, you will improve your clarification and filtrability later down the road when you get your wine ready for bottling. This is very important because Rosé is usually a wine that you bottle very soon. So if you can do something at harvest that will help you filter your wine, 5 months after, or even 4 months after, or 3 sometimes, it is great. So you don't have time to lose. So anything you can do early on will really help you in the process. The last step to extract, it's not really to extract, but to get a little bit more, and this is more about the phenolic compounds, about the thiolic compounds, it's a lees stabilization. So keeping your lees at cold temperature so it doesn't start to ferment, macerating in the juice. So the lees are usually full of polysaccharides and aromatic precursors. So by making a maceration of your juice lees, you will help to release a little bit of these aromas. It is a great technique, but it comes with a great risk too, which is fermentation on high solids, which this would actually ruin the wine. So you want to be very careful with the lees stabilization to make sure you can be at low temperature and have no fermentation going on. I will be happy to talk more about lees stabilization if you have questions about it. So when we talk about pressing, I just want to talk a little bit more about pressing. Here you can see the color difference when we press. This was on a Syrah Rosé. So you can see here we are just filling the tank, filling the press, the tank of the press. And that's it. All the first line is about draining naturally, except for the 3 last that we start to do some rotation to just have, we call it a dynamic draining. And then the pressing happens. You can see the impact on the color. It's huge, but also like the first 4 bottles are very light in color, mostly because they are full of sulfur. This is really the first, we call it the bean juice. It's basically when you dump your bean into the press, that's the first juice that comes out is actually a cleaning juice. Full of sulfur, usually cleaning all the grapes. It is also very commonly the same juice that we get when we do a Saignée. That's why we need more preparation of the juice. It's full of sulfur, full of pesticides, full of insects, full of soil. It's really not the most qualitative juice. So when we arrive to the press cycle, we always recommend to do a sequential cycle with rotation, limiting the rotation. So it's kind of a crémant cycle where you will go slowly in pressure without rotating, and you hold pressure steps. And then you rotate when you need to, which is usually when the flow rate of the juice is getting very low. You can do this manually. You can prepare it before and adjust as you see. Or with our Boker pressings, we have actually an intelligent pressing, which is the organ program that will do this for you. They will measure the flow of the juice coming out. And with this, we'll adapt the time of holding of the pressure, but also the number of rotation and when to rotate. So to get qualitative pressing and juice, which is really essential for rosé, but also for whites and sparkling, it's the organ program is a very great tool. So we really want to focus on the low pressure juice. So this juice here that is in the sequential cycle or crémant cycle. So using an enzyme again is key because you can increase the volume of low pressure juice. Then we recommend the separation. So you cut your pressings here, and then you can do your hard press as a normal press where you keep going pressure, then you deflate, you rotate, pressure, you deflate, you rotate. And that's where you start to have a lot of solids, a lot of color, a lot of extraction. It's not necessarily negative. You just want to separate it because you will treat it differently. To limit the oxidation, again, it's very important to limit oxidation all the way for the full process. But at juice phase, even more, because that's where you oxidize your color. That's where you oxidize your aromatic precursors and you lose some of the texture mostly. So you want to work at low temperature. You want to inhibit your PPO activity, your polyphenol oxidase, with sulfur or with some sacrificial tannins specific for whites and rosé, such as the tannin gallic alcohol. And then, of course, not for people that already have a new press, but if you're thinking about changing your press or, upgrading your press, Booker developed a Booker Inertis, which is an entirely inert press. So it will be, it's a press that has a nitrogen bag attached to it that really allow you to have no oxygen or no air contact. In fact, from the moment you close the gate or the door of the press and you do all your pressing cycle until the end. So you end up with juice that are really pink. You maintain the full color, but you also maintain your full glutathione, which is your natural antioxidant protection for the juice and then the wine. It is a very great tool. I'm happy to talk more about this. We did many trials. We have so many studies on this Booker Inertis, on rosé, on whites, also on reds, actually. Feel free to ask me questions because it is a game changer when we're talking about pressing and talking about controlling oxidation. So once you press and you did, so the idea was to really try to separate your bean juice that you can put with your, sorry, I'm going back, your bean juice of 2 to 5% that you can put with your hard press, about 20% of your volume. These two juices can go together and will need to be fine and have a strong preparation of the juice. It's usually bringing you, the hard pressing at least, will bring you a lot more polysaccharide, mouthfeel, body structure, but also texture. Then it's usually a juice that is more fermented towards ester profile because it's full of amino acids and it will give you a lot of stone fruit, strawberry, berries in general. So a very great tool to blend then after, because the heart of your press, the cuvée, will be way more delicate and can give you more thiolic compounds depending the variety you are working with, but so with more acidity. So using the hard press fraction is actually very clever. If you can separate it and ferment it in another style, you give yourself the opportunity to blend, to adjust the color, to adjust the texture, the mouthfeel, and the aroma's complexity. So juice preparation. That's a step that we don't think so much about. We think it's actually very basic, but as often the basics are here for a reason and have been very well thought before. The bases are essentials. So finding the juice, clarifying and finding the juice as soon as it comes out of the press is essential. The finding will be a multitask step. It's essential for rosé, but not only. For whites, it's also very crucial steps. So it will eliminate the unstable phenolics compound. So the phenolics that are ready to be oxidized and will actually generate all the oxidation reaction later on. So if you remove them, you're actually stabilizing your wine towards oxidation. So you remove this little phenolic compound that do nothing for structure and mouthfeel, but do a lot in terms of oxidation. Let's get rid of them at the juice phase as early as possible. You will also remove oxidation at this moment. You can improve clarification and least compaction by using a fining agent. So usually you can clarify overnight. That's what I'm gonna talk about, at least fining that can clarify overnight will really improve your least compaction so you don't lose too much volume. By improving oxidative stability, you're actually improving aromatic expression. We're going to see this. You can correct color, and you can improve wine stability overall. What type of finding agent are we talking about here? Protein-based or PVPP. Nowadays, we are really focusing on vegan, allergen-free finding agents. So I'm going to talk mostly about pea protein here. PVPP is also questionable. It works great, but some people want to get rid of PVPP in their process. So you can use Polymix Nature, which is PVPP yeast extract bentonite, so vegan, allergen-free finding agent. But then we have the green fine mast, which is our pure pea protein. Green fine nature, which is our pea protein, yeast extract, and calcium bentonite for compaction. And green fine express, that is pea protein, PVPP, ketene glucan, and calcium bentonite. We have been working on pea protein since about 15 years now, where La Motabier has been really focusing on the sourcing. So we are having a really good source of pea protein that allow us to make these finding agents that are really completely clean of aromas and with a very high content of pea protein. So you can trust us on the pea protein finding agent. It's only 1 year that the TTB approved it in USA, but it has been 15 years. People use it all around the world. And in fact, the biggest consumer of pea protein is Provence to work on Rosé. So here some results that has been done in Provence actually, where we are comparing the green fine mass, the green fine nature, and the green fine express, and you can see basically the impact on the color that mostly we are removing some yellow here, and with the green fine express, because we have more PVPP, we can remove a little bit more pink too. You see here where we are, so the control is in the orange tones. Mostly because it got some oxidation, while with the finding agent, we managed to keep the wine more in the pink tones with this actually beautiful salmon peach color that is perfect for Provence style, I would say. But we managed to really clean this oxidized color, oxidized compounds, but also remove the precursors of oxidation to stabilize the wine later on. This is analysis on final wine, while the finding has been done on juice. And you can see a picture here, how the control gets brown, while the green fine mass really keeps this beautiful pink without the yellow. And the green fine express is a little bit stronger because of the PVPP. That's usually what we recommend when you really want to remove red color and you treat press fraction. So we have the green fine mass, which is our pure pea protein, very good to target oxidation. The green fine nature that has been actually developed for Provence market in Rosé to be a little bit more gentle on the structure, but also be a great alternative to PVPP. And then we have the green fine express to treat press fraction. Okay, when we look at, so here is really to talk about color and oxidative stability. When we look about aromatic compounds and oxidative stability too, because we are doing the analysis on final wine while the juice has been treated, you can see here thiolic compounds when we did here a trial with the green fine mast. So the pure pea protein, you can see that the control doesn't have much thiolic compound. And in fact, the green fine mast, the wine that juice that got treated, the final wine after this treatments is like more than double in terms of aromatic compounds for thiolic purpose here. When we look at esters, because this second trial has been done on press fraction, so we look more at esters here, it's the same story. We are having way more, 40% more of aromatic intensity and ester compounds when we do find the wine. And when we look at PVPP versus green fine mast here, you can see that actually PVPP, the wine or the juice treated with PVPP shows more oxidation, shows less persistence. See in the aromatic, less volume, but more bitterness and less aromatic intensity. So overall, the wine is way more qualitative when it has been treated with pea protein. It has more aromatic compounds, less oxidation, more volume, less bitterness. So we really focused on this, removing these phenolic compounds and removing oxidation. Okay, so we clean the juice. It is very important to clean the juice before you go to the fermentation. So you want to stabilize your juice towards oxidation early on. Juice phase is great, and if you don't have the opportunity to do it at juice phase, you can still add your fining agent or a second addition at fermentation. Okay, that's still time. It will not damage the aromas. It will not strip the wine. You actually will end up with more aromas, better profile, softer wine, better mouthfeel, and better color. Okay, next step is going to be about fermentation management. The fermentation management is essential to create aromas and then a little bit of mouthfeel depending which yeast you work on. But really here we focus on aromas. So your color kind of has been done before with the grape variety, the pressing, and the fining. You kind of define your color. So now it's time to make sure your aromatic profile match your color. So you have a good coherence here. You can really orientate the style. It's good to work with your grape variety, of course, but depending what you want to do, fermentation condition will help you. So if you want a more estery profile, you can work at lower turbidity. When you are at lower turbidity, lower than 100, that's where really you will get more esters. And if you want to focus on more varietal aromatic production, so thiolic compounds, you want to go higher in turbidity from 100 to 400. Okay, that's where we will get less ester, more varietal. In terms of temperature, same here. We can work at very low temperature, lower than 55 Fahrenheit. You will focus the metabolism of the yeast on esters production. If you go higher, 60, 66, but you don't be scared to go even 70 Fahrenheit. You will actually promote the metabolism for thiolic compounds and varietal aromas. That's all about how you play with the yeast. So if you give a lot of turbidity to the yeast, you give her a lot of precursors for varietal aromas, she will be able to produce them more. Then if you put her in a higher temperature, it's going to be easier for the yeast to metabolize aromatic precursors of thiolic compounds and so make more thiols. The choice of the yeast is important, of course. Some yeast will do more ester, some yeast will do more thiolic compounds, and some yeast release more manoproteins. So if you choose to age on lees, you can also choose your yeast in function of the mouthfeel you want to get. Okay, for mouthfeel, you can also work with some wood, barrel fermentation, or some actually granulars, so like fresh granulars can be very helpful during fermentation to just help rounding up the mouthfeel. And then the nutrition. The nutrition, so promoting a very healthy fermentation, so you optimize the metabolism of the yeast and you really have clear orientation and a clean and fresh profile. But also with nutrients, you can give some aromatic precursors to the yeast and really help boosting thiols or esters or both. Okay, so the key here are really about between the nutrition, the yeast choice, and then temperature turbidity are essential to orientate the wine profile and decide what you want to do, you know, in terms of aromatic profile. Okay, very commonly, the press fraction are directed to ester production, while the cuvée is more directed to varietal aroma production. So talking a little bit about nutrition, I just told you it's essential. One big thing is preparing the yeast properly. So we realized, again, back to the basics, we made some new trials with our Steam, which is our yeast protector, basically the rehydration product you use in the water to help the yeast being active and good and have an optimal metabolism. And we just reconfirm again the importance of using an steam. It's a very basic trial, that it's a basic step that we assume is done, and it's it's in our protocol. We don't think about it, we use it or not, but in fact it's essential, and we should rethink this and make sure we don't skip the step of using an steam. So an steam is vitamin, mineral, sterol, ergosterol, and unsaturated fatty acids. So no nitrogen here. It really will help you or help the yeast implant and get resistant all the way through the fermentation. So the yeast doesn't stress, and the yeast has an optimal metabolism, which allow us to have way lower of sulfur compounds. So we manage to reduce completely the content of H2S that the yeast will produce, because there is no stress for the yeast. There is way less VA, and this is all the time in any type of wine. When you use an steam, the yeast doesn't stress again, particularly towards the end of the fermentation. And there is always more aromas. In this case, we're about 50% more thiolic compounds, just because we optimize the yeast metabolism. So using an steam is an essential step when you prepare the yeast, to make sure you can optimize the metabolism of the yeast, and so have clean wine that are aromatic. Then you can orientate the style of your wine with nutrition. So you have here two nutrients that we developed. One is called optithiol, the other one optiester. Optithiol is a nutrient that is rich in sulfur peptides, so it's cysteine derivate and glutathione, which are precursors of thiolic compounds. We would add it before or at inoculation. And basically, the more you add, the more thiolic compounds you get. This is not bringing you any ion or any nitrogen in terms of energy for the yeast, but it will bring you aromatic precursors that the yeast can transform if you add it at the beginning of fermentation. So as you can see in this graph here, we can basically, with 15 grams per hectoliters, we already more than double the content 3 months after the fermentation of thiol, and then we triple or more than triple when we put 30 grams per hectoliter. So the more you put, the more you get. Optiesters is a selection of amino acids and ergosterol, again, very low ion contribution, so not participating to the ion itself, but giving food for the yeast to transform. So this amino acid and ergosterol, the yeast can transform them to produce more esters, actually more even ethyl esters, which are more the floral, pineapple, roses, stone fruit aromas, and not too much banana. Okay, so these are great tools. You would add it at the beginning of the fermentation to help direct the style of your wine. You can add both. We have been lately adding both in the wine with great success. To get a little bit more complexity and riper thiols, you can use the optiester and the optithiol 50-50 in dosage. It's a great tool to help you building complexity on some grapes that maybe don't have much to express. Then talking about yeast, I want to show you our new yeast this year that is focusing on Rosé. The yeast is called Excellence Rosé. We developed it through a breeding technique. It took us a few years to get to this yeast, where we basically breed father and mother to get the genetic we want at the end, or at least genetic markers. The idea of this yeast was to develop a yeast to answer the market demands. So having a very clean, pure, elegant, and fresh aromatic profile, but also reduce the SO2. So we really focused on the meta. It's part of the excellence range. So resistance to high alcohol, wide range of temperature, wide range of turbidity, and wide range of pH, but also high resistance to sulfur, short lag phase, POF negative, so it will not produce, so it has no cinnamyl activity, so it will not produce the compounds that give are precursors of phenolic off flavor, so volatile phenols, which are the bread taint. So being sure to be POF negative, you don't basically feed the bread to have like some of aromas filter. This yeast has also some particular points. It is a yeast that can consume sulfur, so you will end up actually your fermentation with 0 sulfur. So that's one goal, is to really have no total sulfur, have a better free total rate, because in fact this yeast doesn't either produce ethanol, so you have a very low aldehyde that combined with the sulfur. So we optimize the sulfur efficiency, but also there is no mask of aromas. So this yeast, by consuming sulfur, is actually not producing H2S or all these off aromas that sometimes you don't perceive, but it kind of mask all the aromatic profile. So we end up with a very complex profile that is focused on purity and elegance. The other genetic marker that this yeast has is that this yeast cannot degrade malic acid. So we end up having more malic acid, and so a better acidity and more freshness. Okay. And it's a yeast that can do thiolic compound and ester, so very easy to orientate with turbidity and temperature. Just want to show you here some results about the sulfur and the sulfur combining molecules. As you can see here, we ended up with a total sulfur of 8, while our control was 28, and our mast was about 20. So we did put sulfur on mast, and then we ended up with only 8, which is we saved 20 here. In terms of TL35, so that's how much sulfur we need to add to get 35 milligrams per liter of free sulfur. You can see that here we are actually way lower too. And in terms of ethanol, there is no production of ethanol, so there is no combining effect of the sulfur, and also just cleaner profile. Here, the acidity management, another trial here that you can see. Basically, there is 1 more gram per liter of malic acid in the final wine when we use Excellence Rosé, not because the yeast produced malic acid, but because the yeast didn't consume this malic acid. So we end up with better pH, better control of our acidity. I want to show you another trial that has been done at the Rosé Center last year, where we really tried to orientate the style. So we actually did 2 big styles. We put the Excellence Rosé against our Excellence STR, which is our ester yeast, for an ester process. So cold settling, fermentation, turbidity at 80 NTU, and fermentation at 56 Fahrenheit. And then we did the thiolic process, which is our Excellence Rosé against our Excellence TXL, which is our thiolic yeast, where we did a yeast stabilization for 8 days at 4 degrees, 4 Celsius. The alcoholic fermentation was at 65 Fahrenheit, and the turbidity was 200. Okay, so really we play turbidity, temperature, and then even stabilization. The results are here. So I'm going to help you reading a little bit this graph, but basically, so we look here at the first 2 lines, where we're looking at the ester production here in the first graph, where our Excellence Rosé is very similar to our Excellence TXL here, with pretty much the same amount of esters, while we were in thiolic compounds, thiolic profile. But then if we look at the thiols production here, the TXL produce way more thiols than the Rosé. So really, the idea here is to, even if you are on a thiolic process, the TXL will be more elegant, not really a punch in the face of aromas, but really about purity, elegance, and complexity. We go on the ester process. It's pretty much the same result here, where you can see that we end up with a little bit less ester than our ester yeast here, but we get more thiolic compound even on ester profile compared to our Excellence STR. So here I know it's complex and there is a lot of graph, but the conclusion here is really to say that you can choose the yeast depending what you want to do. We have the Excellence TXL for the thiolic compounds and mouthfeel. We have the Excellence STR for ester compounds and really ester profile. And then you have the Excellence Rosé that is more hybrid in between. So it can be producing more esters and more thiols, depending the profile you choose and the winemaking process you choose, so turbidity, temperature. But also it's just a very complex, pure, and elegant profile that is not necessarily pungent. Okay, so very important to control the fermentation by turbidity, temperature, yeast nutrition, and yeast itself will help you completely define your aromatic profile. So now we have the color done, or pretty much done and stabilized. We have the aromatic profile almost done. I'm gonna tell you that you can still adjust if needed. It's time to blend usually your press fraction with your cuvee because you created some complexity and some spice cabinet here. So you can blend. And now we are going to talk about aging. During aging, you can express more aromatic compounds. So some precursors that you didn't express during fermentation. It's still time. It's not too late. So you can still do it now. And then we'll just talk about how to protect before bottling. So how can we express this aromatic compound during aging? It's through enzyme at this moment. So precursors are there. You can't add more precursors. So whatever your grape has, whatever you added with the yeast nutrition and whatever the yeast didn't express yet, that's what we focus on. So all the precursors that are present in your wine that has not expressed yet, there is enzyme to do this. We can use with the enzyme called enzyme FW. That's a pectinase that has a beta-glucosidase activity. So here we are focusing on terpenes, isoprenoids, to increase aromatic intensity, floral and fruity characters. Okay. And then you have the enzyme thiol, that is an enzyme, a pectinase that is a beta lyase and beta-glucosidase activity. So we really focus on expressing more thiolic precursors, also terpenes and isoprenoids. Here you will increase more the wine freshness and more passion fruit, pineapple, blackberry type of aromas. Both of these enzymes can be added during fermentation or during aging. So that's the beauty of it. Feel free to ask me samples at the end of the presentation because you can do a trial in the bottle before you actually add it in the tank. You put the enzyme in the bottle, you wait 1 or 2 weeks, you taste and you see the results before you treat a full tank. So that's a great tool to really adjust at the end during aging. Just to show you some results here. So on Rosé, when we use an enzyme thiol, we really increase the freshness, the red berry, tropical fruit, the length of aromas, and also just the overall quality of the wine. When we do it on whites, it's pretty much the same thing. Here we increase more citrus and more tropical fruit, but a lot the freshness. And when we did it on red, that's actually where it's very interesting. We are increasing the fresh fruit, reducing the ripe fruit, and increasing the cleanliness of the wine. So that's very interesting also when you do rosé that are darker and more coming out of Saignée. You will actually be more on a red profile because you pick your grapes for red. So it's a tool to help you increase freshness and reduce the perception of overripe ripe fruit. So between a yeast that doesn't produce sulfur, that has a very clean aromatic profile, a yeast that doesn't consume malic to keep freshness, and then an enzyme thiol to really change this perception of aromas, you can really play with the freshness profile. So last point here is about aging and stabilization. So here our goal, now we have the color, we have the aromas. The mouthfeel is really about using enzyme, lees aging. You can use monoprotein at this step to help the lees aging. But now we are really focusing on protecting the wine. Basically, we did the job. What we wanted to is to not screw it up. So we want to make sure our color stays stable and protected from oxidation. Our aromas are still fresh and clean and intense, and our mouthfeel is still balanced. And for this, you can, of course, use sulfur. But nowadays, we are really trying to talk about alternative to sulfur and reduce our sulfur addition. So to stabilize sulfur and to allow you to not add too much sulfur or to completely as an alternative to sulfur, you can use Aroma Protect. Aroma Protect is a yeast derivative that is rich in sulfur peptide, which is in fact glutathione. So using Aroma Protect will help you really increase your natural antioxidant resistance of the wine during aging. It's gonna elongate your shelf life. Basically, you help protecting the color, you help stabilize your wine toward oxidation, you help protecting the aromas and keeping them fresh and present. What the glutathione does is really an antioxidant, so it's gonna catch the quinone. So at the beginning of the oxidation process, the glutathione is gonna react with the quinone, stopping the reaction here and not allowing the quinone to react with other phenolic compounds, such as color or aromatic compounds. So we really stop the process at the beginning. And we also put the wine in a lower redox potential, which is more stable and less sensitive to oxidation. There is no risk of reduction, though, because it's often a question that I get. There is no risk of reduction. It's just that the glutathione is here to catch oxygen if there is oxygen or oxidation reactions happening. Otherwise, the glutathione stay until one day there is oxygen. Some results of trials here. These are trials that we look at the thiolic compounds. The first graph is showing you the thiolic compounds. We compare a control with Aroma Protect 3 months on 3 months of aging, where you can see, so in October, the wines were the same. And in January, we end up with the control losing between 76 to 100% of its thiol, while the Aroma Protect lost only 0 to 4%. So we completely protected. So the tank is the same, basically. It's pretty much the same than it was at the end of fermentation. So the wine is still fresh. If we look at the same thing, but 6 months of aging, here we're looking at the loss of aromas. You can see that the control lost between 55 to 75 of its thiolic compound, while the wine with Aroma Protect lost only 20 to 30%. So Aroma Protect is a great tool to not use too much sulfur. So alternative to sulfur if you want to protect your wine from oxidation during aging, but also allow you to add less sulfur, so have your sulfur more stable and your free total ratio stable, and you use Aroma Protect as an antioxidant. It's also a great tool when you age your wine, you bottle your wine on several months, but it's the same wine, and you want your tanks to not get aged. You don't want to increase your sulfur because you want the wine to be the same basically from January to April, because you have bottlings that's every month. And so Aroma Protect in the tank that will be held back for a few months is a great tool to really allow you to have the same profile than the first tanks that got bottled. Then when we talk about stabilization, we have to talk about protein stability. We recommend to use sodium bentonite always. So the bentosol poudre is a great tool. During fermentation is always better. You have a better activity of the bentonite. You have higher temperature, just movement, which makes the bentonite always in suspension and more active, and lower alcohol, and actually lower pH too. So better to use it during fermentation. You can really easily drop half of your dosage when you use it during fermentation. Then when we talk tartaric stability, this is very important to think alternative to cold. Cold is the enemy of rosé when we are talking about wine, because it's really the source number one, in fact, of dissolved oxygen and oxidation. And that's how you work all hard. And when you arrive to stabilization, just putting it cold will impact your color, will impact your aromatic profile and your mouthfeel. So very commonly now, no, people don't use cold anymore. So you have the choice between CMC, Vino Protect, or Manoprotein StabK. I have a full webinar that I did not so long ago on stabilization. I recommend you to look at it, and I will be happy to answer any question you have. But basically here you have the pros and cons. The CMC is a great tool. It will work completely fine to stabilize wine for tartrate. If your rosé is highly colored, though, we will have to think about StabK, the manoprotein, because CMC, the cons of CMC, that it can react with color. It can also react with protein. So if you're not fully protein stable, it's not a good option. The other option is manoprotein, where you can really stabilize tartrate and color. you do improve the mouthfeel, so you do improve roundness and body and weight. It's a natural approach as it's coming from yeast. Then as CMC, energy and water saving, it really maintain and preserve the wine quality, but the monoprotein has no interaction with protein and stabilize color. So it is a great choice if you do have more color or you are not fully stable and you don't want to go too much bentonite. Then to reach oxidative stability, we talked about it, really fining will help you. Using a fining agent at the beginning of the fermentation or in the juice phase will be your solution, but you can still use it during aging if you need to fix the color, if you need to fix some aromatic profile, if you know, it still can do. So as a conclusion and a take-home message, Rosé, to me at least, is one of the most difficult wine to make. It is also one of the most fun to make because you can do so many things. You can really play a lot. The style is mostly defined by color because when somebody see a wine on the shelf, they choose by the color, and the color will tell them a story. The color is already telling them what it's gonna smell like and what it's gonna taste like, and you don't want to disappoint them. So the color is gonna define really the style of the wine. And from this moment, you can choose every step of the process. So you can make a lot of, each decision is really a choice for style. The pre-fermentation and the fermentation steps are key, are very essential. So the harvest, of course, is very important. The extraction process, managing the press cycle and using enzyme, an enzyme crush is really what you want to do to or get more volume or just get more qualitative volume and discard the strong or hard press fraction. It will help you, using enzyme will really help you control what you extract and also control your press cycle. The juice preparation with fining agents, that's where you achieve oxidative stability, is key. And the management of the fermentation, turbidity, temperature, yeast choice, and nutrition, all these will help you deciding if you want to be more esters, more thiolic compound, more terpenic, or just a little bit everything and more complex. You can create a very elegant, pure style, but the fermentation management is really what defines the aromas. When we arrive post-fermentation, there is not much to do there. It's really about protecting and stabilizing. So the hard work was on pre-fermentation and fermentation. All the way through the process, particularly at the end, you really want to focus on oxidation management. Oxygen is really the big enemy of Rosé. It is the enemy of many wine styles, but for Rosé, it's really not a great tool. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. I know this was a little bit longer. I'm so glad I managed to share